day, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Martin Palmer. I am the CEO of Faith. And we are joined by our nuns from Nepal. Welcome, Annie and colleagues. Delighted to have you with us again. I know for many of you, this is a return visit to the webinars on the Faith long-term plans. For some groups, this is perhaps the first time you've come across this. So let me explain. I'm the patron of the Faith long-term plans on behalf of three organizations: Faith Invest, the International Network on Conservation and Religion, INCR, and the WWF International Program on Beliefs and Values. Then essentially the long-term plans are an opportunity for faith groups to, in a sense, do an audit, to actually look at what we as faiths run, own, influence, control, the status we have, which exceeds any other organization. There is no group, no other structure in the world that reaches as deeply into communities as the faiths do. There is no other organizations in the world that are so sustainable. All our faiths have seen communities through times worse than this, through wars and civil wars, through famine and plagues and so forth. So we know how to sustain, and we have a certain wisdom around that, but we also are major stakeholders in the planet. We own or run or influence about 50% of all schools. We own about 8% of the habitable surface of the planet. And that means we have an enormous influence and impact. And we are trusted in ways that NGOs or the UN or governments are not trusted. We have a sacred responsibility to fulfill that trust. And today, under the assets section, which is the first of our 7 categories, and if you haven't seen the guide to the 7 areas for faiths to look at, not that we're expecting every faith to cover all of them, they range from financial assets to the notion of celebration, something which Hiko Sikh and Ravneet have immensely successfully launched within the Sikh faith, for example. But we ask you to look at that guide, and we're very happy to send it to you, so do let us know if you haven't seen it. So that you do an audit, you look at what you've actually got, what you control, what you influence, because in many cases as faiths, we don't know, we haven't looked at it. So that's an opportunity to do this. This session within the assets is slightly unusual in that most people think that the influence of the faiths is purely to do with human well-being. And of course, that is central to every single one of our faith traditions. However, this is about the fact that the faiths also know we are part of nature, not apart from it. No single faith does what so much of contemporary society has done, which is to say there is a thing called nature, and then there's us, and there's some kind of division set between. We are part of nature, and therefore the long-term plans must also be addressing the well-being of all life on earth. Everything, as it says within my holy book, the Bible, everything that flies in the sky, that crawls upon the earth and swims in the waters. And that was the original covenant that Noah made after the flood, that God made with Noah after the flood, was not just with human beings. It was with every living species upon the planet. And all our faiths have that wisdom that we are part of a much greater, much more wonderful story, which is why we describe the long-term plans as being about people and planet. And today, we are particularly focusing in on the planet and on our impact upon everything that flies in the sky, everything that not only walks upon the earth, but grows from the earth, and everything that is in the seas and the seas themselves. And it's a particular delight and pleasure to hand over to Chantal Elkin, who is going to steer us through this. I'll come back at the end and tidy up at the end. But Chantal worked with the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, which I had the great honor of being the Secretary General of for 10 years, particularly on projects to do with illegal wildlife trade and illegal forestry. And then a year and a half ago, took up the first ever post within WWF International, working with beliefs and values. And she brings an astonishing background of knowledge and an incredible ability to get one of the largest environmental organizations to take seriously working with the faiths. There could be no better host than Chantal. Chantal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Martin, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone to this webinar. It's such a pleasure to be with you here. Let me just share my screen to get into my PowerPoint presentation here. As Martin mentioned, I head a program at WWF called the Beliefs and Values Program, which brings together religious and conservation partners. And when I previously worked with ARC and Martin for many years, we did similar things, bringing religious and conservation partners together. So I've seen that there are many, many ways that faith groups around the world are currently and have been and will be protecting nature as part of their programs. So I wanted to share with you today some of those examples so that they can serve to inspire you and give you some ideas of how you might include nature in your own long-term plans. And by nature conservation, I'm really referring to the protection of forests and other wild habitats and water sources, and of course of wildlife. And I'm also referring to the restoration of degraded areas and water systems. So just to back up for a question for a minute, and Martin really addressed this well in his introduction, but why should we focus on nature conservation in our long-term plans? I think most of you know that the world is currently in a deep crisis. We're suffering from the terrible repercussions of man-made climate change. We're causing the Earth's 6th mass extinction and seeing a 70% almost overall decrease in population sizes for wildlife. And just today I was reading quite a staggering report from some of the world's top scientists calling for emergency action. And I quote their report: "The planet is facing a ghastly future of mass extinction, declining health, and climate disruption upheavals that threaten human survival because of ignorance and inaction." So they're really warning that people still haven't grasped the real urgency of the biodiversity and climate crises that we find ourselves in. And yet another report tells us that 80% of the UN Sustainable Development Goals won't be met unless we stop the loss of nature. So quite a serious situation. But as Martin also said, the faiths are in a very powerful position to help reverse nature loss and to restore nature. For one thing, religious groups own and influence significant areas of land, and many groups actually own forests that can be better protected or revived and restored to be home to threatened wildlife. But perhaps more importantly, faith groups have a really huge influence over how people behave towards nature. And this is a really important aspect of what you can do. So I just want to pause here and actually show you a quick 5-minute video that I was involved in creating and Martin has so expertly narrated, which gives some examples of the work we've been involved in linking conservation and religion. And I think although it was really originally focused on giving an introduction to faith and conservation to a conservation science audience, I think it can also be useful to you to give you sort of an introduction and a sense of some of the ways that culture, spirituality, and conservation can be linked. And then just in terms of our agenda, after that, I will give a couple of examples of some previous long-term plans that had a strong focus on nature. And then I'm going to turn the floor over to our two wonderful speakers, Ravneet Singh and Anit Seringyuden. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion. So I just want to remind everyone, as we go along, please put your comments or your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those during the question and answer session.
Long before anyone ever said the words conservation or biodiversity, communities around the world were caring for their environments as a natural expression of their cultural, spiritual, and religious beliefs. This film is about just some of the places where culture, spirituality, and conservation meet, and why working together could make all the difference in meeting the greatest environmental challenges of our time. Indigenous territories are estimated to cover up to 22% of the Earth's surface and host significant biodiversity. In Hawaii, indigenous and local knowledge is passed down to sustain abundant lands, or aina mamona. Hawaiians come together to restore the community's traditional and sacred role and responsibility for their lands and waters. In Ethiopia, it's easy to spot thousands of the silver domes of churches encircled by bright green forests that they have sustained for centuries. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has nearly 50 million followers. Ethiopian scientist Dr. Wasi has studied the biodiversity of these forests for decades. They serve as refuges for wildlife, including pollinators. But these sacred forests are threatened by encroachment. Through a conservation partnership with Dr. Meg Lohman and the Tree Foundation, churches are working to further conserve these forests. The worldview and decision-making of most people on Earth is colored by cultural, spiritual, and religious values. 86% of the global population belongs to a local or world religion, with leaders serving as trusted moral guides. In recent years, many influential religious leaders have called on their vast communities to care for the Earth. For example, in 2015, Pope Francis published the most powerful Catholic commitment and issued an urgent invitation to all of us to care for our common home. The United Nations has called the Faith's Environment Programs the largest civil society action on the environment in the world. Recognizing that we need to ignite a huge civil society movement, it is natural that conservation turns to the faiths as partners. The range of the tiger, for example, spans some of the most religious countries in the world. In 2014, Indonesia's most influential Muslim organization took the unprecedented step of issuing 2 Islamic edicts, or fatwas, calling on all Muslims to protect threatened wildlife and end the illegal wildlife trade as part of their religious duty. Another fatwa soon followed, prohibiting destructive forest and peatland fires. With support from conservationists from Indonesia's National University, ARC, and WWF, 400 Muslim clerics in Sumatra and Java are spreading awareness about the fatwas amongst tens of thousands of people in their communities. Inspired by the Indonesian model, a fatwa prohibiting involvement in the illegal wildlife trade was also passed in Malaysia. Cambodia has one of the highest rates of forest loss in the world. Buddhist monks there have proved themselves powerful forces for conservation, acquiring legal protection of a 20,000-hectare forest, leading community patrol teams, raising environmental awareness, and significantly reducing forest crime. Wrapping their saffron robes around tree trunks, they bless trees and ordain them as monks, safeguarding the forest and the wildlife they shelter. Over 20 years, the IUCN Cultural and Spiritual Values of Protected Areas Specialist Group has developed many resources, including guidelines, to help integrate sacred natural sites into protected area management. In 2016, the IUCN added Indigenous Peoples Organizations as a new membership category to help steer the global conservation agenda. Indigenous peoples, faith groups, conservationists, businesses, and government agencies are increasingly coming together to form new partnerships. How can we move forward together to meet the environmental challenges of our time. Cultural, spiritual, and religious leaders can appeal to the hearts and minds of millions of people, and conservationists can provide technical assistance to strengthen and support conservation initiatives. Together, we can transform our relationship with the natural world.
So I hope you enjoyed that film, and I hope it demonstrated that faith groups are indeed powerful protectors of nature, and that one of the most impactful things you can do as a faith group is to inspire environmental action by spreading awareness in your communities about the links between your religious teachings and nature conservation. And also, as the film shown, you can demonstrate many practical actions that can have a real impact. And now, before I turn the floor over to our speakers, I wanted to just introduce a couple of examples of some long-term plans from the previous round of long-term plans from 2009 that had a strong nature component. And these are the Mongolian Buddhist 8-year plan and the Presbyterian Church of Cameroon's 7-year plan. So the Mongolian Buddhist plan looked at the areas of wildlife, forests, water, and pollution. And under wildlife, for example, they looked at how their religious teachings could spread awareness about not harming wildlife during breeding season, looking at reducing the consumption of furs and skins, and only using traditional medicines that do not have endangered wildlife and plants as part of their ingredients. In terms of forest conservation, they emphasize conserving and restoring forests, and that everyone should plant a tree and care for trees, especially when a new monk or a nun joins the monastery or nunnery. And interestingly, they looked also at researching mining licenses for exploration in natural areas like mountains and water sources, and they sought to have an influence with the authorities on those permits. So that was quite a proactive stance that they took. In terms of water conservation, they looked at safeguarding lakes and rivers and natural water areas from pollution, but also asked that everyone take their own responsibility to save water. And then they also looked at sustainable offerings to shrines, particularly those that are outside, so that the offerings wouldn't harm wildlife if they were eaten by them, and to also ask people not to put their offerings in plastic bags and glass containers. In terms of the Cameroon Presbyterian 7-year plan, they also looked at the areas of forest and water and protection of wetlands and wildlife. So under forests, for example, they advocated for tree planting by logging companies and also by local communities. So they looked at what tree seedlings could be used in different ecological zones. They established tree nurseries, promoted the growing of wood for fuel, looked at kind of mapping and identifying endangered forests, and developing community forest management teams. They also looked at protecting water systems against exploitation and replenishing fish in lakes and rivers with local communities, and working with fish farmers to identify appropriate fish species, and advocated against unsustainable fishing by multinational companies. And in terms of protecting wetlands and wildlife, they looked at their own teachings to raise awareness in communities that were living near the wetlands and wildlife sanctuaries, and to collaborate with those communities on alternative economic activities, and also to encourage urban development that respects natural areas, and advocating for the implementation of legislation against the destruction of wetlands and wildlife. So I think between these plans and the film, you can see that there are many, many different ways that faith groups can protect nature. And now let's turn to our speakers to sort of bring these plans more alive and hear from them about their amazing initiatives. So each of them will give a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll take maybe another 10 minutes to answer questions and have a discussion around their presentations. So please, again, as you go along, and if you have questions, please post them in the chat box and we will get to them during the Q&A. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce a very dear friend of ours, Ravneet Singh, who is the South Asia Project Manager at EcoSeek, and he's been spreading environmental awareness in the Punjab in India. Over the last 10 years, he's been a major catalyst for faith-based environmental activism in the Sikh community. And he's been organizing youth environmental leadership training on tree plantations and advocating for the reduction of waste in Sikh gurdwaras. And we're very excited to have you here, Ravneet. I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Hi, thank you, Chantal. And hello, everyone. I hope I'm visible to everyone, and I'll just begin my presentation. All right. EcoSeek began in 2009 with the Alliance of Religions and Conservation along with the United Nations. And in our previous, say in the 10 years in the long term, we just had a focus to establish a connect between the Sikh community and the nature. And especially we wanted people to understand beyond human centric, because like as Martin said, the species that fly in the sky and the species that live on the ground and below the ground and the species that live in the seas and oceans, they are important. But like every other community, Sikhs have also lost the connect between nature, though it's a part of their sacred culture and religion as well. So we had our grassroots of the Sikh eco-theology, which clearly mention about how living in harmony with the nature is so very important as being a Sikh. So we had our long-term plan always circling around these 5 assets, 5 resources that you can see visible on the screen. Like assets, we had our theology, education, and media advocacy, and the projects we do everywhere in the community, like in the diaspora. I'll come to that in the next slide. And the most important part is celebration, because the community responds very well to the celebration. Everything that has to be teaching, if that comes in a package of a celebration, that goes a long way, and it establishes, how do I say, like it becomes embedded in the families as well as part of their culture and tradition as well. So celebration, I consider the most important part for every community or every groups that want to have a long-term plan. Celebration has to be an important thing. So now we have EcoSeek registered in the USA, in India, in UK and Canada, and proudly we are working with the communities there in these countries as well. March 14, one of the most important lessons or part of celebration in the Sikh community now was initiated by EcoSeek. It never existed before 2009. So this Sikh Environment Day became worldwide, and many, like thousands of gurdwaras in the international diaspora in India celebrate March 14 with the environmental aspects, with the tangible things like plantation drives, like cleanups, like energy audits in the gurdwaras and whatnot, bicycling and art competition. Like every age is involved, every gender is involved, so that people can understand how nature is connecting, how Sikhism is connecting with the nature. So it's a picture of the 7th Guru of the Sikhs, who is handing over a plant sapling to the disciple to plant. So this picture has a lot to say. This became part of the entire story. Sorry, I'm just struggling with my slideshow. So the entire Sikh community, along with the temporal seats, were involved. We always had 7 brilliant steps to offer to the community, how they should celebrate Sikh Environment Day, and that becomes a part of their tradition throughout the year. And now, after 10 years, the major Sikh communities, Gurdwara management has offered 50 acres of their land to be converted into forest. This is, these are the after effects of whatever we did in the past. So now in 2018, as I said, the celebration is a major thing. Guru Nanak, the first Guru, was being celebrated for his 550th birthday. So EcoSec decided that it will plant 1 million trees with the community, with the engagement of the community worldwide. So in the first year, in the beginning, we had 23 teams who participated and planted 550 trees as a part of celebrating Guru Nanak's 550th birthday. And that idea flourished in more than 9-10 countries, I believe. Yeah, it was in 10 countries. But later on, we discovered that there was a methodology in Japan, what they call Miyawaki methodology, that Japanese way offered 1/30th land to be utilized. You know, it's, how would I reword, like you can have 200 square yards of a space and you can plant 550 trees on that. So that methodology was like a super thing, and that project could become tangible. It was measurable. You can record what's going on in your forest. It was so easy to adapt, so easy to learn that methodology. So we went to the experts in India, Shubhendu Sharma, and he taught us how to plant trees with this methodology. And we started planting microforests in the name of Guru Nanak, and we called them Guru Nanak Sacred Forest. The idea of creating sacred forest, like that was a big hit in the community. Everybody wanted that. I want my own sacred forest in my own village, in my own plot, in my school, in my college, in my village yard, in my business house, in my space nearby, in my factory. So the Sikh community really wanted to celebrate that way because the piece of land was so tiny. So that way we were just going on, and right now we have been able to make 200 such sacred forests of 550 trees, and so far covering more than 14 acres of land. So this slide shows a little old, but right now we are on 14 acres. And the good news is this project is tangible, replicable, measurable, very cost effective, and it includes ownership of the stakeholders. People who really want to establish, they have to get involved. So that brings the safety part. And this slide shows what kind of resources you need to create one microforest. So it gives a bit of a glance on what we need. So I'll just run through the list. So we need native species, a list of that native species, because we only plant native species with this Japanese methodology. You need seedlings, you need a piece of land. For soil conditioning, you need water retention, perforation material, and nutrition for the soil. You need machinery, human power, bamboo sticks, and stuff to mulch your land. You definitely need water. And for safety, you need fencing. And here are some pictures. You can just see how the forests look right now. As UN declared 2021 to 2030 as UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, EcoSec already dedicated 10 years, next 10 years in creating these Guru Nanak Sacred Forests, or just sacred forests in any name with any community worldwide, so that we can increase our good footprint on the earth. Here are some pictures. This is 14 months old sacred forest in Punjab. Here's another one, which is 12 months. And I'm just showing these pictures to create better understanding how these forests look like. This is 8 months old, and this is another 10 months old. And this is 11 months old, like a picture from a bit of distance. This is how they look. And to move forward, I'll ask Pippa to play the video that we have made especially for showcasing our Guru Nanak Sacred Forest project. Over to Pippa.
EcoSec is a Washington-based nonprofit that was launched in 2009 at Windsor Castle, UK, in collaboration with United Nations and the Alliance of Religions and Conservation. EcoSec has got 501c nonprofit status in the USA, and it is ATG approved social organization in India. It is also registered as charitable organization in the UK and Canada. Working in line with the United Nations, EcoSec invested the past decade in strategic planning on biodiversity. The next 10 years of EcoSec will be dedicated to the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. To achieve this goal, EcoSec launched Evergreen Revolution in Punjab, which is the first such mass movement in the world for planting and nurturing biodiverse Guru Nanak Sacred Forests to combat climate change. These forests are created using a Japanese methodology called Miyawaki method, pioneered in India by TED fellow Shubhendu Sharma, mentor and advisor to EcoSIC's Guru Nanak Sacred Forest Project. This methodology ensures 100 times biodiversity, 10 times growth, and 30 times carbon absorption. First Guru Nanak Sacred Forest was created near Bathinda and announced at the EcoSIC press conference in Chandigarh on 14th March 2019. In 13 months of time, we created 167 microforests of 550 plants. And these forests record at least 95% of survival rate. These forests are geotagged and can be found on Google Maps. One can visit and add reviews online. Today, 95,000 plants are thriving in these sacred forests, covering nearly 12 acres of land, spread out in 4 states and 3 union territories. Through these projects, we have been able to conserve 134 native indigenous forest species of India. The supply of these species is backed up by our in-house plant nursery. EcoSIC has provided free of cost forest making training to over 340 youngsters in Punjab. 25 of these trained Miyawaki forest makers are now regularly involved in executing these projects. The growth results are just astonishing. Within 24 months of initial care and watering, these forests are becoming self-sustainable. All of our forests have shown extraordinary results. Trees have grown 10 to 15 feet high, bearing bigger leaf lamina and an excellent plant health, and they attract a variety of insects and birds. Today, EcoSIC is being followed by a large number of organizations in Punjab for expanding the biodiversity manifolds to spread this evergreen revolution in Punjab as well as other parts of India.
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੀਆਂਵਾਕੀ ਦਾ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾਨਕ ਬਗੀਚੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਮ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਸ਼ਲਾਘਾਪੂਰਨ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਹੈ.
Our present infrastructure has made forest making really easy. Within just one call, EcoSIC delivers saplings from our in-house nursery along with the required tools and also provides forest making experts on the project site to install the forest. Our aim is to plant 1 million trees and create thousands of sacred forests in collaboration with the grassroots communities. This model has already shown exemplary results. Hundreds of village communities and individuals are already offering us their lands to host these conservation projects. Come forward to associate with EcoSIC and also help us to grow more forest and expand our outreach. Contribute in procurement of saplings, material, machinery, transport, tools, and manpower for making these forests. Your contribution towards forest regeneration can make your business carbon neutral, and your continuous effort in this direction can also make your business permanently carbon negative. We work in coordination with the HR department to facilitate plantation ceremonies for team building, where our forest experts certify the sustainability efforts of the participating employees. Your sacred forest will be geotagged on Google Maps and your contribution will be credited. Be a part of this ecosystem conservation and restoration project. Get yourself acknowledged and recognized for your noble efforts for safeguarding the Mother Earth with EcoSIC.
So the last 3 things I just want you to add that we recently finished one project of 1 acre, our mega project. In 1 acre, we planted 10,000 trees of 39 different native species. And the other thing that we don't allow, we don't recommend any commercial activities in these sacred forests. So nobody is allowed to harvest fruits because they are only dedicated for the nature that they could attract species and small animals and birds to the forest. And we also have a very strong belief system that every eco being can create one sacred forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravneet. I would like to bring Chantal back onto the screen as well, please. And if you stay, Ravneet, I think we have a few questions that have come through that we can ask you.
Thank you so much, Ravneet, for your wonderful presentation. I think there are several questions, Pippa.
There are, yes. We have had one question that's come in, Ravneet, that has asking how you communicate with the communities that you work with. Is it largely online? Do you visit groups? I notice you have lots of volunteer groups that have set up. And how often do you communicate with those groups?
To bring the groups on board, like who want to create their own forests, I think it has been happening online, but we regularly do press conferences and we publish whatever we do on the social media as well. And right now the social media has worked so very well that seeing our results after 1 year, many people now know how these sacred forests behave, how they grow. And we geotag every sacred forest on the Google Maps so that people have the access where to go. So they have the road direction. They personally visit and they publish on their social media. And this is how it has been, that kind of networking from the word of mouth has been helping us the most. And in addition, I would say many government officials and people who love forestry and biodiversity, they have become silent advocates for EcoSec because the work has been acknowledged by the community so very well.
And also a follow-up to that question is how you monitor and evaluate that work in all of these different places.
Okay, we have a monitoring standards, like every 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months, we visit or we do a video call in the COVID times. People help us to understand how the plant lamina size is growing, how mulching, like when the trees shed their leaves, how very well the ground surface is covered by the mulching, and the soil type that, when after 1 year, the carbon content of the soil increases and the organic matter in the soil increases. That gives us a very good understanding how well the forest is growing. And in addition to everything, how many different type of insects, spiders, flies, and so many things have been attracted to the forest. So we click pictures, we do videos, the height of the, like average height of the forest, average girth of the, the width of the stems and the main trunk of the trees, and many other things. I'm forgetting a couple of more things. Yeah, lamina size and density of the forest, like how the density of the forest has increased. Like from, we always say that these forests are 30 times denser. So from the right from the floor of the forest up to the maximum height, you just see the green leaves. So this is how the forest produced 30 times more oxygen than the general landscapes. So there are standards how we calculate, how well the forest is going.
Thank you. We've had a comment here from Iyad from UN Environment, who says, this is great and very timely, and gives a link that he says, please visit the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration website, and it's essential that you register your efforts and make them known to the world. So there's a link there for you to follow up with, Ravneet. A question has come in from Hajat, who has asked, how do you ensure that the 95% growth of the planted trees?
Okay, we don't do many, it's not tough thing. We just ask the stakeholder, the party who has planted the forest, they just have to water the forest as we recommend, and they have to do the de-weeding of the forest. Like whenever the weed grows, they just have to do the de-weeding. And 95% is our average survival rate in our forest. But I have also witnessed some of our forests have been 99 to 100% survival as well. Even in Ludhiana, in my city, and sometimes when there is another forest in Maruvan that is in Rajasthan, the desert, that is beyond 85%. That's a little low than 95, but average is 95, and which is just wonderful and fantastic. So you just have to water and de-weed the forest and nothing else.
That's fantastic. There is a question here from Rosilla, who asks how women and youth are involved and how do you tap into their unique abilities?
Oh, yeah. Most of our projects right now, we engage women in the villages, especially in the rural, under the Manrega scheme. It's a national scheme which provides work in the village area, and those workers come free for us in creating those microforests. And the workers are 99% women, villagers. So we are very happy for the results, how women power work, and they do not need any unique capabilities or training. It's just like a couple of hours they work with us, and we train them right way how to plant the saplings. It's little, the methodology has they have some customs how to use the blade and how to install the plant in the soil. So we train them right way. And about youth, we train them. We have given training to about 350 youngsters in Punjab, and many of them are still working with us as professional forest makers for Guru Nanak Sacred Forest Project. So we give free of cost training in Punjab, totally free of cost.
Excellent. While we're talking about women and cost, Hajat has asked how the women's work is paid for.
Yeah, the government pay them. It's under a government scheme. The government pays them, but we take the labor work in return. We don't have to pay. That's a very unique and beneficial model for the villagers who plant sacred forests in their land. So they don't have to personally pay. The village don't pay to the labor, but the government pays the labor.
Excellent. And then we just have one final question that's come in through Christoph Stuckelberger from the Geneva Agape Foundation, who again comments it's a great initiative of EcoSeek. And he asks if you cooperate with other faith communities, so Hindu, Jain, Christian, Muslim communities. And
we are very much open to every community. As I mentioned earlier, we received a message from Brahma Kumaris as well, and we were very happy to visit them and install their forest and help them in any way, in every way. And we are also open that they can choose their own name, like if not Guru Nanak, anybody who they love, their God, but the sacred forest word is a must thing. So something that is sacred, we have a very strong belief that the sacred groups, which are still existing, like hundreds of years old, they are existing only because they were sacred groups. Just if they were not sacred, people would have destroyed them long ago. So right now, what we are creating, we believe that it will sustain to the next ice age, because being sacred, people will not destroy them. And with the methodology that we have been using, the forests are self-sustainable after 2 years of nurturing and maintenance. After that, the nature controls everything, and they can just live till the next ice age.
Excellent. Thank you, Ravneet. That's fantastic. I will I think that's it
so much for the ice age.
That is. I will hand back to Chantal.
Thank you so much, Ravneet. That was really fascinating. And I think tree planting is such a major focus for so many faith groups around the world, that this methodology of microforests, I think, can be such a great tool for them. And it shows no matter how big your land is, even if you have a small parcel of land, you can create a thriving forest. It's incredible. And I think you had mentioned another time that you have guidelines and materials and videos and things that for free that other groups can access. Maybe you could say a word about that.
Yeah, we have created, not created yet, we have shot all the lessons and tutorials for the Kickstarter project. The entire methodology has been described very precisely, and practically we have been doing everything for that, the teaching course. That may come out in, I don't know how many months, because we were in collaboration with our mentors, A-Forest. So whenever that comes out, people will have access to the videos, and they can create their own sacred forest wherever they live, using the simple Miyawaki methodology. I think there are some things which are a bit technical, especially the forest surveys, how you choose the native species, how you define them, how you survey them. But definitely I can understand in your own villages and in your regions, you must have your own people who knows and understand the type of plants which have been growing there, who can, horticulturists and zoologists who knows I think botanists, they know the plants and everything. They can just, help you in doing those technical things. The rest of the standard operation is pretty much simple, and it's just a matter of training. You can easily learn. I belong to an engineering background, and I have learned the methodology, and many engineers in our groups have learned. Even simple villagers have learned this methodology from us. So it's not that tough. A few things are technical that can be handled professionally. Yeah. But we have done another second. We have created microforests remotely as well. And we are confident, if God willing, if things are fine, we will be able to create one microforest in America very soon, that too remotely. We are targeting. Yeah.
So thank you for your guidance, and I hope some people in participants will take you up on your offer to help guide them. But we will post your resources on the webinar page so people can access it. And now, if you can stay for the remainder of the webinar, Ravni, great, but I know there's a big festival going on. So now let me introduce our wonderful next speaker. Ani Tserengyuden is a young nun living in the Himalayan region of Nepal. And she says until the age of 8, she grew up surrounded by white snow mountains and pure clean rivers. And then when she was 8, she joined the Buddhist TEKCHOKLING nunnery in the capital city, the busy capital city of Kathmandu. And she's now the coordinator of the Khoryug environment group at her nunnery, under the guidance of His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, who is the head of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. There are now 65 monasteries and nunneries in India, Nepal, and Bhutan in the Khoryug network. Ani Tserengyuden, it's a pleasure to have you here, and you can now share your screen and your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We prostrate to our lineage guru, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, and our root guru, very venerable Khenchen Sultim Gyatso Rinpoche. Before we start any auspicious activities, we seek blessing from our lineage guru and our root guru by prostrations. Tashtile, namaste, and hello everyone. Welcome to Khoryug presentation. I'm Matsuma Tserengyuden from Western Karma THEKCHOKLING nunnery, located in Kathmandu, Nepal. Tsuma is the term used to nuns in Tibetan. Today, on the behalf of Khoryug from Bhutan, Nepal, and India, I'm here to share and exchange information about Khoryug activities carried out by nuns and monks to preserve environment in accordance with the instructions of His Holiness the 17th Karmapa. Khoryug in Tibetan language means environment. Kumbhas is the word I will be using through the presentation, as it includes both monastery and nunnery. It may be interesting information for all of you that founder of Buddhism, Shakyamuni Buddha, was not a born Buddha. He went through several years for hardship to become an enlightened one, or Buddha. The message for us is that we can also become a Buddha if we follow his instructions with a dedication and practice. And Buddhism teaches that the root causes of suffering are the 3 poisons: attachment, anger, and ignorance. And mind training is the main method for minimizing these root causes. And it is on the basis of those concepts of development, arising, and interdependence that Buddhists cultivate the desire to protect the nature. It is this philosophy that gives rise to compassion for wildlife and other living beings. When I read those slides, I have been thinking about how we are dependent on trees for the air we breathe. It is only because the trees process the air to make breathable that we are alive. and depending, arising, and interdependence. Most of Buddhist leaders are encouraging their student and general public to actively participate in environment protections. And based on those thoughts, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa started Rangjung Khoryug Sungyop, which means self-arising environment protection environment by His Holiness 17th Karmapa. Here you can see the logo of Khoryug, which is designed by His Holiness the 17th Karmapa. In March 2009, the first Khoryug was held in Vajravidya Institute in Varanasi, India. Since then, we have had 8 conferences, all of 9. During those conferences, monks and nuns are given knowledge and training about the activities by environment experts. The highlight of those conferences is the presence of His Holiness, which inspire us to go back to our gombas and carry out all the Khoryug activities. In Tibetan, Buddhists are known as Nangpa, or those who focus mainly on internal development. We believe that we must change ourselves before we can change others. And there are 65 monasteries and nunneries who involve in Khoryug activities. This is the Khoryug organizational chart, which country has 1 or 2 coordinators appointed by His Holiness in agreement with the gompas. Each gompa in turn has a coordinator and Khoryug team. And one of the founding members, Tikila Chungelpa, needs special mention here. His Holiness requested WWF USA to allow her to work part on the establishment, development of Khoryug and capacity building of senior monks and nuns. Khoryug Program Officer Tenzin Punzo and Ramirez provide science training and practical support for projects. And this mechanism allows in-country capacity building workshops and training to the gompas. Here, Khoryug member from Bhutan and Khoryug member from India and Khoryug member from Nepal. Even though Khoryug was started as an environment movement of gompas, His Holiness has emphasized the need to be reach out non-Buddhist and lay people's organizations and individuals. These are partners of Khoryug at the central and country levels. Those are the areas we mainly focus on: forest and wildlife, water, climate change, waste, and disaster management. 10 years at a glance, 85% of monasteries are inspired by doing Khoryug work, and over 400 monks and nuns receive CERT training, which means emergency response training, and 100,000 trees had been planted by nuns and monks, and 20,000 people are served by monastic health clinic. And approximately 1,720 monks and nuns receive their 20% of their food from their own organic farm. And there are 3 publications were produced by Khoryug: Environmental Guidelines, 108 Things to Do, and Disaster Management Manual. These publications have been produced with the guidelines from His Holiness. And these guidelines have been individuals and followed closely by the monasteries in carrying out all the Khoryug work. And His Holiness is holding the Chinese and English copies of the environment guidelines. This is the basic for the focus area of Khoryug: forest protection, water protection, waste management, addressing climate change, and wildlife protection. And 108 Things to Do is a set of simple everyday life and activities we can do to make a difference. And this is an example from 10 10 things you can do to make a difference. And due to time constraint, we have had to choose only a few gompas and activities for the presentations. Due to climate change, disasters of varied nature are taking place more often. In 2015, a 7.9 Richter scale earthquake causes unimaginable disaster in Nepal. And we monks and nuns were in the front line rescuing, providing relief. And however, as His Holiness said during the 7th conference, that monks and nuns jumped into the action out of the compassion, which was why we are unharmed. He instructed that in the future, we must be skilled and properly equipped. And he noted that some of us were even just wearing slippers during the dangerous rescue work. In addition to those, approximately 19 gompas participate or carried out river and water resources cleaning activities. And Telepur monks are cleaning, nuns are cleaning river. And Lava Kagyu THEKCHEN Monastery, monks are cleaning water source. Since 2009, altogether more than 100,000 trees have been planted. The tree is a sacred symbol for Buddhists because the main events in the life of the Buddha are linked to trees. He was born under a tree, underwent hardship for 6 years meditating under the tree, and was enlightened under the Bodhi tree and passed into nirvana between two sal trees. This is the tree plantation at Mirik in India. As the picture clearly shows the difference between PULLAHARI in 1994 and present day. Isn't it beautiful? Before, the hilltop was covered with a maize fields, which has now been developed into lush forest, providing shelter to over 50 species of birds and animals, which help for cross-pollinations and result in good harvesting. And there are 2 carbon pools, one in PULLAHARI and one in Karma Park. According to Khenpo, coordinator of Khoryug, Nepal, the most important lesson he learned was that for nature to survive, waste management is crucial. And Kagyu Nalanda Monastery is well known for its organic farm and extensive cooperation with the local and state level government and non-government organizations. They have targeted to plant 1 million trees. It is interesting to note that trees planting can also be done in the middle of the city on the roadside, not only in an open area. Following are Khoryug activities for addressing climate change. Nunnery in Bhutan is growing their own organic vegetables. This is my nunnery. Vesel Karma TEKCHOKLING Nunnery was founded by very venerable Khenchen Sulim Gyatso in 2006 in Kathmandu, Nepal. He has also started nunneries in Bhutan and Tibet. I joined the TEKCHOKLING Nunnery in 2008 at the age of 8. I am a native of Nar village, Manang district, which is in the Himalayan region, rich in biodiversity and surrounded by beautiful snow-covered mountains. In the nunnery, I have the opportunity to receive education in Buddhist philosophy and secular education in Sri Mangal Dev boarding school. And I recently completed my 10th grade from my school. And here we go, short list of activities conducted by TEKCHOKLING Nunnery. The nunnery uses solar water heater for boiling 1,350 liters of water per month, saving both electricity and cooking gas, firewood. In addition, we save money as well. Those pictures are solar panels of our nunnery. The nunnery doesn't have extensive rainwater collections. We collect water in buckets and also find ways to recycle water. And Yuenchop is a water that we offer to the deities every morning. Lama Thinle, coordinator for Khoryug India, emphasized the need for us to limit our wants. Our limitless desire causes immune sufferings. As mentioned before, Buddhists turn towards inner development, such as mind training, to minimize our attachment, anger, and ignorance. Attachment can also be understood as an uncontrolled desire. As His Holiness Gyaltsab Karmapa said, protect the earth, live simply, act compassionately. Our future depends on it. On the behalf of Khoryug webinar team, we would like to suggest, especially to the young generation like us, that we need to really awaken to our mistakes without delay. And we need to take practical steps together to preserve our Mother Earth. And this is me when I first joined my nunnery. And on the behalf of Khoryug, we would like to express our thanks to the webinar host for the opportunity to share and exchange our experience, and to all the participants. And for more information, please contact here. And thank you, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anit Seringyuden, for your wonderful, remarkable presentation of what the Khoryug Network has done. I think people will probably be quite interested in looking at the environmental guidelines and the 108 things that you can do for the planet. Could be very helpful for people. So we will post that on the Faith Invest website after this. And I wonder if there are any questions that have come up for Ani.
We have one from Hajat, who actually does ask, how did you develop the 108 rules and how do you observe them?
As His Holiness Gyaltsab Karmapa suggests us and advise us, we all the monasteries and nunneries conduct all the Khoryug works, like preserving water and planting and water harvesting, all the activities, Khoryug activities, we follow through the 108 guidelines. We all observe according to His Holiness advice, which are all included in 108 rules.
And are they sent through to your whole network for everybody to observe them?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. We do have a question that I may throw to you, Chantal, that asks how or where can we find scientific guidance or resources to understand how to create appropriate solutions for nature protection?
Great. Yeah, I can address that maybe in the right after. I just want to ask if Tequila Chungkyalpa is on the line, because she's been very intimately involved with Khoryug and in the process of developing the guidelines. So if she is online, it would be great to hear just a little bit more from her about the process of developing the guidelines and how the network functions. Are you there, Tequila?
Yes. Hi. Good morning.
Great. Good morning. I know it's very early for you over there in Madison, Wisconsin.
For some reason, I am, oh, here we go. I can start my video.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So I know Anila mentioned that I have been involved as an advisor for Khoryug since 2008 when we first designed it. At that time, I worked for the World Wildlife Fund US. And so His Holiness asked that WWF allow me to work with him for 35% of my time, Chantal, you know what that's like, to help set up the network. And so from the very beginning, the way we designed it, you heard Anit Sering mention the 5 issues that we selected. They actually were developed based on the biodiversity science that we knew at that time for the Himalayas and for the Tibetan Plateau, and based on all the climate projections that we were looking at. And so from the very beginning, Khoryug has been designed looking at the latest science. I think the question that someone asked was how the 108 things you can do were developed. And those were actually created during a 5-day conference in 2010, where we brought environmental and climate scientists to meet with the monks and the nuns. And so the first 3 days was just a series of presentations from the scientists. And then the following days was actually a lot of brainstorming, very similar to any other stakeholder group, actually sitting with these, monastic leaders and coming up with different solutions that fit the monastic priorities. So if you look at the guidelines and the 108 things you can do, under each of these sections, you will see there are religious activities as well as scientifically measurable activities. And all of the monasteries take their own environmental project priorities from this 108 things you can do. So the process begins with the monasteries identifying the issue they're most concerned about. So, in the case of Kathmandu, where Anila is from, almost all the monasteries and nunneries selected water and climate change as their two most important topics. And so then they would go into that section and look through what are the activities that they themselves as a community want to do. And each of those sections offer, 20, 30 different activities they can do. Everything from, keeping your source area clean to recycling the water that goes into all of these. There are literally hundreds of cups of water that are offered every day in the institution, to actually reforestation as a way of protecting water resources. And so once the monasteries identify the issue they care about, they go through the guidelines, and then during the conferences that we have, they bring the series of priorities they care about the most and they want to take on, that they have democratically elected basically to prioritize. And then they present that to His Holiness and to the scientists that are there at the conference. And so there's a lot of feedback and tweaking that happens in the process. I think one thing worth mentioning is that we see Khoryug as a very practical way of doing capacity building. So for all of, you saw Anitsering presenting for her nunnery, she will probably have that role for a few years, right, Anila, before she passes it on to the next generation. And so through this process in the last 12 years, we have educated and had over 100 monks and nuns in these coordinator roles, who get comfortable to understand the science, who every year meet in these annual conferences to do not just capacity building around the science and solutions, but actually around management. How do you design a project? How do you monitor it? How do you work with communities? How do you engage the government? How do you think about media? So it's a very holistic approach as opposed to being fixated on one kind of activity.
Thank you so much. That was really valuable overview. And it's a very interesting model of having a framework for a large network of organizations, but giving each monastery or nunnery the freedom to look at their own plan and their own priorities. So I think we will share the 108 things and the guidelines. I think will be really enlightening for people. Thank you, Tequila, and thank you, Ani Seringyuden. We only have a few more minutes, so I just wanted to sort of wrap up by reiterating some of the questions you can ask yourselves as you're thinking of your long-term plan, including nature in your plan. You can ask yourself questions to start the process, such as looking at the kind of the amount of land and the kind of land that your faith group owns or influences. If there's any threatened wildlife that you can help to conserve in your area, or if there's a water source, a river or a fresh spring that you can help to safeguard. And look at the ways that you can act. For example, could you look at restoring land and replanting forests, or doing tree planting, or create a sacred grove? Could you look at river cleanup drives, or engaging with local fishing communities on sustainable practices? A really important initiative, I think, for everyone is to link sermons and educational outreach to raise awareness about key issues related to nature. and you can take up on-the-ground action to safeguard threatened species. Another potential activity is eco-twinning, and I think we're going to cover this in a later webinar, I think on February 4th. But if you're in maybe a highly urbanized area where you're not near nature, you could perhaps look at twinning with another parish or another community, either in your own country or another country that's close in a threatened area of biodiversity, to support them in their work to protect nature. But I think everywhere you are, you can look at including nature in your long-term plan. And perhaps a good step, if you don't have any ideas that have surfaced from this or from your discussions internally, you can always call on a local environmental group and ask them about the conservation priorities in your local area, and maybe there'll be some opportunities even to work together. So again, we're going to post resources that Pippa, in your last question you raised. There will be resources available on the Faith Invest long-term plan program webpage that we will post, linking faith and conservation and all the resources that we spoke about today, and some additional ones, both from our program at WWF and also from other partners. It was great to have Iyad from the UN Faith for Earth program here. His website, I'm sure, has a lot of great resources we can link to. And another program, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, also linked to the UN Environment Program, has, for example, a bunch of toolkits for different faith groups on forest protection. So there is quite a bit out there that you can look to. So once again, we have, I think, let's see, maybe less than 15 minutes to see if there are any other questions or comments that you'd like to raise with us.
We do have some good comments that have come in though with further resources. So Christine Muller, you have posted, for more information about the Miyawaki method of growing microforests, you've given a website to link to, aforest.com, and oh no, this is the same one. And Tequila, you've kindly provided the link for Khoryug environmental group. So we will make those available again after the webinar. I don't think we have any further questions that have come into to the Q&A or the chat. I will just, we've had somebody has raised their hand. 1 second. Hajat has raised her hand. So Hajat, I will ask you to unmute now. Hajat, can you?
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, but I'd like to talk off video.
That's fine, yeah.
Oh, is that okay?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you very much for today's webinar. It has been very interesting. I'm not sure that I understood how the last speaker, how they developed the 180 rules for caring about the planet. Did you say you are going to provide it on the website here? Are we going to be able to access it?
Yes, Tequila has actually provided the link in the chat as well, and I'm sure if we have permission, we can either link to it from our Faith Invest website, or we can maybe put it onto the website. But the link is in the chat, Hajat.
Oh, it is. Okay, I'm going to check it out. Thank you.
I don't think there are any other questions that have come in at the moment, but lots of comments saying thank you for the presentations and how informative people have found it. We have one more hand raised, allowed to talk. Songita, can you?
Yeah, thank you all. That was a great presentation. Sonigitu from Nigeria. My question is, how do we evaluate and assess the impact of the project that was presented? Over the years, trees have been planted in many regions. However, we are not able to monitor and see the various impact or even maintain it. What approach are we going to use this time around? Thank you.
Yes, it's a big question, and I think it depends on each project to develop a monitoring and evaluation system. I wonder if I could ask Tequila actually to talk a little bit about how Khoryug monitors and evaluates its impact. Is that possible, Tequila?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
So from the very beginning, what we decided was, because the monasteries, what we valued was that they were able to select their own activities. We found it really hard to create monitoring system where we could quantify the overall impact. We could do it in terms of how many trees were planted, but it was really hard to do it in terms of what the behavior impact, for example, was from monastery to nunnery, because they were selecting different kinds of activities. However, what we decided to focus on was providing a protocol where we have a program officer whose job is to actually travel from monastery to nunnery throughout the year. And so in that process, he's able to glean, you know, how many trees were planted, but also to see how many people attend the actual meetings, how many of the monks and the nuns are actually changing their attitude and behavior. So we have two kinds of monitoring protocols that are set up, however much we can quantify, and then more of a qualitative analysis of how we think the monks and nuns are, in some sense, absorbing pro-environmental attitude and behavior signals, and how that is influencing their own attitude and their behavior. One of the really interesting things that we didn't set out to study in the beginning, because we were so focused on the monasteries and the nunneries, was actually what we started observing, which is the impact in the local community. So one of the things we found was that when the monasteries and nunneries that, for example, Anitering is from, put up their solar panels, it was so visible that it immediately started triggering a change in the local community. And so interestingly, because they happen to be in an area that some of you know very well, including Martin, which is Bodha, which is sort of, you know, the circle of hotels and restaurants, and then monasteries and nunneries. So what we found was the hotels and the restaurants actually started immediately adapting to what they were seeing and started adopting solar. And when we did an interview with, we did a very randomized interview with some of the hotel and restaurant owners, and what they said was the message they got from the monasteries and nunneries was that it's cost effective. It wasn't anything to do with a religious action. It had nothing to do with, you know, what His Holiness Karmapa said or what Buddha said. It really was the monasteries themselves. When you think of them as institutions, they have enormous kitchens. They host up to 500 monks and nuns. You know, they have actually exactly the same conditions as these hotels and restaurants. And so when they put up a solar and they are able to show that it saves them money in the long term, that it's a steady source of energy in a country where load shedding and electricity is a constant issue, that is the signal the community got. And so one of the challenges we're looking at right now is, well, how do you study that? You know, we can quantify number of trees planted. We can even do observational and qualitative data on how that changes the monks and the nuns within the institutions. But what about the communities that are also changing the behavior?
Thank you very much, Tequila, for that. Very interesting. And I think it's so really depending on the project, how you develop the monitoring and evaluation methodology, but we can certainly post to the long-term plan website, to the page, different examples of how faith groups are doing it, to give you some help.
That's great. And we have had one question in. Razilla from the African Council of Religious Leaders for Religions for Peace has actually asked about challenges. She said she's not sure if she heard any challenges mentioned in the projects presented, and are there any, and how are they addressed? I know Ravneet has now left us.
Yeah, sorry to ask Tequila and Ani again, maybe just from your perspective.
So Ani, that question was if there are any challenges that you come across in your project, and how do you address those challenges?
Yes, before we start Khoryug, many Khoryug activities like conserving water, and while we conduct with the biogas, we have faced with a lot challenges that in talking about our nunnery, we have stopped our biogas before 3 years, and because we couldn't give the most time for it and prepare it, and we started vermicompost before, and now we stopped because we couldn't get enough time for manage, and the waste that we used to for conduct the vermicomposting is we use in organic farming as mega organic composting, which is useful for our farm, right? And before in our nunnery, we are conducting the waste management systems, and before we conduct it, it was really new system for us, and it was here in our nunnery there are so many nuns, and within nuns it was very difficult to familiar with all the nuns and giving them message and information because it was first time, and we Khoryug members and all the senior nuns had do their best for familiar with all the nuns, and they and with the unity of all the nuns, and now we can success it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware of time. I'm not sure we have any time for any more questions, so I'll hand back to Chantel and Martin.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone, thank our guest speakers especially, and everyone who participated on the call. And I look forward to hearing from you if you need any more guidance or information. And as I said, we'll post all our resources on the Faith Invest website, but don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any specific questions. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Martin.
Thank you, Chantal, and thank you everyone for joining us. 36 years ago, I was asked by His Royal Highness Prince Philip, who was then the president, international president of WWF, to basically travel the world and find out what were the faiths doing about the environment. I found 2 projects. Arosha, the amazing Christian project that was then only really in Portugal, and I'm delighted to see Dave Bookless with us, that was combining land management and care for nature, particularly birds, and the Buddhist perception of nature, a project linking Tibetan Buddhists and Thai Buddhists. I've listened today, I've spent my life working on this issue. At points I was almost in tears with gratitude and excitement. It is astonishing what is happening and what we as faiths can do that nobody else can do. We now have about 100 major religious organizations that have signed up for the Faith long-term plans. The reason they're important is that they give you an opportunity to assess what you own, how influential you are, and what you could do. And also to join something that, with the UN's blessing and involvement, we are going to bring to the world at the end of September this year, to show that even if the governments can't agree, the faiths are going to work side by side to protect people and planet. So thank you all. Thank you particularly to Anil and to Ravneet. Wonderful to see Tequila coming in as well, to my colleagues who've set this together, but to all of you in particular. And if you haven't yet decided to make a Faith long-term plan, please be in touch with us. We would love to help you and discuss it. For those of you who are already doing it, we look forward to seeing what you produce. Many, many thanks indeed. And what an exciting range of ideas we've had today. Thank you so much, and goodbye.